There is a truth about selling that most people avoid because it sounds too sharp, too direct, too uncomfortable for the ears that have been trained to seek ease. Yet truth does not soften itself to please. It stands firm, waiting for those who are ready to receive it. And the truth is this: sales is not about convincing others, it is about aligning yourself so completely with certainty that the world cannot help but respond. Most people approach selling with hesitation hidden beneath polite words. They speak, but inside they doubt. They offer, but inside they fear rejection. And this silent contradiction is what closes doors before they are even knocked upon. For life does not respond to what you say, it responds to what you are. If you approach another with the feeling, "I hope they say yes," you have already placed them above you. You have made them the judge and yourself the beggar. And no sale, no opportunity, no exchange flows freely where there is inner begging. The energy of lack repels faster than words can persuade. The brutal mindset, the one that is rarely taught, is this: you must know that what you offer is inevitable for the right person. Not optional, not forced, but destined. When you stand in that knowing, rejection loses its sting because you no longer see it as loss, you see it as misalignment. There is no desperation in alignment. There is no chasing uncertainty. You do not need everyone. You were never meant for everyone. And the moment you release the need to be accepted by all, you become magnetic to those who are meant to say yes. This is the hidden law beneath all successful selling. Detachment creates attraction. When you walk into a conversation thinking, "I must close this deal," you tighten. Your words become strained, your tone becomes unnatural, and your presence becomes heavy. But when you walk in knowing, "What is mine will recognize me," you relax into power, and power that is relaxed is irresistible. You see, people are not buying your product. They are buying your certainty. They are buying your belief. They are buying the unseen energy that tells them, without words, this is right. And if that energy is not there, no script, no technique, no strategy can replace it. The world has taught many to memorize lines, to follow steps, to use tricks. But the deeper truth is that selling is not mechanical, it is spiritual. It is the meeting point between your inner conviction and another's readiness to receive. If you doubt, they will doubt. If you hesitate, they will hesitate. If you believe deeply and without apology, they will feel it before you even speak. And here is another truth that feels harsh but liberating. Rejection is not personal. It is not even about you. It is simply the universe redirecting energy away from what does not match. When you take rejection personally, you shrink. When you see it as guidance, you expand. Every no is clearing the path for a stronger yes, but only if you remain unmoved. The brutal mindset requires emotional discipline. It asks you to stand steady when outcomes fluctuate. It asks you to detach from appearances and remain anchored in knowing. It asks you to stop measuring your worth by responses and start measuring it by your state of being, because the outer world is always echoing the inner one. If you feel unworthy, the world will reflect hesitation. If you feel powerful, the world will reflect opportunity. If you feel certain, the world will reflect agreement. So the real work is not in perfecting your pitch, it is in perfecting your state. You must begin to speak from a place where you are not asking for permission, but offering alignment, where you are not trying to persuade, but simply presenting truth, where you are not chasing approval, but recognizing it when it appears. And this changes everything. Suddenly, you are no longer afraid to lose a sale, because you understand that nothing meant for you can be lost. You are no longer attached to outcomes, because you trust the process of alignment. You are no longer shaken by rejection, because you know it is not a denial, it is direction. And in this state, something remarkable happens. People begin to trust you more, not because you are trying harder, but because you are needing less. There is a quiet authority in someone who does not cling. There is a natural attraction to someone who stands in certainty without force. There is a magnetic pull toward someone who knows their value without needing to prove it. This is the mindset that transforms effort into ease. This is the shift from pushing to allowing. This is where selling becomes less about doing and more about being. So stand firm in your knowing. Release the need to convince. Let go of the fear of rejection. Speak with clarity, not desperation. Offer with confidence, not attachment. And trust that what is aligned will come forward without struggle. Because in the end, the most powerful sale is not made through pressure, it is made through presence. A certainty is the unseen force that moves every exchange, every agreement, every decision that appears on the surface to be logical, but is in truth deeply emotional and energetic. People believe they are persuaded by clever words, structured arguments, or carefully designed techniques. Yet beneath all of that lies a simple and unchanging law. They respond to the conviction they feel in you, not the sentences you form, not the tone you try to perfect, but the quiet, steady belief that either stands firm within you or quietly collapses beneath doubt. When a person speaks without certainty, there is always a subtle hesitation. Even if it is hidden beneath confident language, the words may sound correct, the delivery may seem practiced, but there is an invisible gap between what is being said and what is being felt. That gap is where trust dissolves. It is where the listener begins to question, even if they cannot explain why. Because human beings are not merely hearing words, they are sensing alignment. They are measuring whether what you say matches what you believe. And if there is even the slightest contradiction, it is felt instantly. This is why persuasion, as most understand it, often fails. It attempts to compensate for a lack of certainty by adding more effort, more explanation, more pressure. It tries to build conviction externally instead of cultivating it internally. But no amount of external effort can replace internal alignment. You cannot transfer belief you do not possess. You cannot create confidence in another while standing in doubt yourself. So the work begins within. You must arrive at a place where what you offer is not something you are trying to sell, but something you know holds value. Not because someone told you it does, not because you hope it will be accepted, but because you have claimed that truth for yourself. This kind of certainty does not need reinforcement. It does not require constant validation. It stands quietly, firmly, without strain. And when you speak from that place, your words change without you forcing them to. They become simpler, clearer, more direct. There is no need to over-explain, because you are not trying to convince, you are simply expressing what is already settled within you. People feel this immediately. They feel the absence of pressure. They feel the presence of calm authority. They feel that you are not dependent on their response, and that independence creates trust. Because when someone is not trying to force an outcome, it signals that they believe the outcome will unfold as it should. This is what draws people in. Consider the difference between two individuals offering the same thing. One speaks with urgency, layering words upon words, trying to anticipate objections before they rise, filling every silence with more persuasion. The other speaks with ease, saying only what is necessary, leaving space, allowing the conversation to breathe. The first may appear more active, more engaged, more determined, but beneath that activity is tension. Beneath that determination is fear. The second appears almost effortless, and it is this effortlessness that holds power, because certainty does not rush, it does not chase, it does not cling. It knows that what is aligned will not require force, and this knowing removes the need to manipulate, to pressure, to persuade beyond what is natural. When you reach this state, something shifts in the way others respond to you. Questions become more open, resistance softens, conversations flow, instead of feeling forced, not because you have mastered a technique, but because you have aligned your inner state with what you are offering. This alignment creates coherence, and coherence builds trust. Without it, even the most polished presentation feels hollow. With it, even the simplest statement carries weight. You begin to realize that the goal is not to say more, but to be more anchored in what you say, to remove the excess, the unnecessary effort, the subtle tension that comes from trying to control the outcome. And in doing so, you allow the interaction to unfold naturally. This does not mean that everyone will agree, or that every opportunity will convert into a result you desire. But it changes how those outcomes are experienced. Because when you are rooted in certainty, you do not interpret a lack of agreement as failure. You see it as a reflection of alignment, or the absence of it. And this perspective frees you. It frees you from the exhausting cycle of trying to win everyone over. It frees you from measuring your worth through external responses. It frees you from the pressure of needing every interaction to succeed in a specific way. Instead, you begin to focus on maintaining your state, because your state is the source of everything that follows. If you feel uncertain, no strategy can fully compensate for it. If you feel grounded, no obstacle can completely disrupt it. This is why inner work becomes the foundation of outer success. Not as an abstract concept, but as a practical reality that shapes every interaction. You start to notice that when you take time to center yourself before engaging with others, the quality of your conversations changes. When you remind yourself of the value you bring without exaggeration or doubt, your presence becomes steadier. When you release the need for immediate results, your approach becomes more natural. And all of this happens without adding anything new externally. It is simply a shift in being. This is the paradox that many overlook. They search for better words, better scripts, better techniques, believing that improvement lies in doing more. But often, improvement comes from removing what is unnecessary, from letting go of the need to control, to impress, to persuade beyond what is true. Because the moment you try to be something you are not fully aligned with, it is felt. And the moment you return to what is real for you, that authenticity becomes your strength. Certainty is not loud. It does not demand attention. It does not rely on intensity to make its presence known. It is quiet, steady, unwavering. It does not fluctuate based on immediate feedback. It remains consistent, regardless of temporary outcomes. And it is this consistency that builds credibility over time. Not just in the eyes of others, but within yourself. Because each time you act from certainty, you reinforce it. Each time you choose alignment over persuasion, you strengthen it. Each time you trust your value without needing external confirmation, you deepen it. And gradually, this becomes your natural state. A state where you no longer feel the need to convince, because you understand that belief cannot be forced. It can only be recognized. And recognition happens when what you offer meets someone who is ready to receive it. Until then, your role is not to push, but to remain steady. To speak what is true for you. To stand in what you know. To allow others the space to respond freely, without pressure or expectation. Because in that space, genuine agreement can form. And that agreement, when it rises from alignment rather than persuasion, holds far greater strength and stability than anything that could be forced into existence. There is a quiet law at work in every human interaction, one that often goes unnoticed because it operates beneath words, beneath actions, beneath the visible surface of effort. It is the law that governs attraction, and it does not respond to need, it responds to alignment. The more tightly you hold onto something, the more it seems to slip away. The more urgently you try to secure an outcome, the more resistance you encounter. And yet, when you loosen your grip, when you release the strain of needing things to happen a certain way, something begins to shift. This is where detachment becomes power. Most people misunderstand detachment. They confuse it with indifference, with lack of care, with disengagement. But true detachment is not about withdrawing your interest, it is about releasing your dependence. It is the ability to desire something without making your sense of worth or stability dependent on whether it arrives. It is the ability to move forward with intention while remaining internally at peace, regardless of the outcome. And this inner peace is what creates attraction. When you approach a situation needing a specific result, that need begins to shape your behavior in subtle but powerful ways. Your tone becomes slightly tighter, your words slightly more urgent, your presence slightly less relaxed, even if you try to hide it. The underlying tension reveals itself, and others feel it. They may not consciously identify it, but they sense that something is being demanded from them rather than offered to them. Need creates pressure, and pressure creates resistance. It places the other person in a position where they feel they must either comply or protect themselves, and in most cases, people instinctively choose to protect their autonomy. They pull back, hesitate, or disengage entirely. Not because what you are offering lacks value, but because the energy surrounding it feels constrictive. Now consider the opposite state. When you approach without attachment, there is a lightness in your presence. You are still clear about what you offer, still confident in its value, but you are not dependent on the immediate outcome. You are not trying to force a decision. You are simply presenting what is available and allowing the other person the space to choose freely. This freedom is what draws people in, because human beings are naturally resistant to pressure, but deeply responsive to autonomy. When they feel they have the space to decide without being pushed, they become more open, their guard lowers, their curiosity increases. They begin to explore rather than defend. And this shift changes everything. Detachment allows you to remain centered. It prevents your emotional state from rising and falling with every response you receive. It keeps you grounded, regardless of whether someone leans in or pulls away. And this stability is incredibly attractive because it signals confidence without arrogance, strength without force. It communicates, without words, that you trust the process. That trust removes the need to chase. And chasing is what repels most opportunities. When you chase, you unconsciously communicate that something is missing, that you need the other person to complete a result for you. This creates an imbalance. It places them in a position of power and you in a position of lack. And from that position, every action you take is filtered through urgency. But when you stand in detachment, the dynamic shifts. You are no longer seeking completion from the outside. You are already steady within yourself, and because of that, your interactions become more balanced. You are not above the other person, but you are not beneath them either. You meet them as an equal, offering something of value without needing them to validate it. This equality fosters connection. It removes the invisible tension that often exists in interactions driven by need. It allows conversations to unfold naturally, without the weight of expectation pressing down on them. And in that natural flow, people feel more at ease. Ease creates openness. Openness creates possibility. This does not mean that you stop caring about results. It means you care differently. You focus on the quality of your presence rather than the control of the outcome. You give your full attention to the moment, to the exchange, to the clarity of what is being shared, without projecting yourself. into a future that has not yet formed, because the more you project, the more you disconnect from the present, and the present is where influence exists. Detachment brings you back to that space. It allows you to listen more deeply, to respond more authentically, to engage without the filter of anxiety. And this authenticity is felt immediately. It creates a sense of trust that cannot be manufactured through technique. People can sense when you are trying to get something from them, and they can sense when you are simply offering something to them. The difference between those two states is the difference between resistance and attraction. When you release attachment, you also release fear, because fear is often rooted in the possibility of losing something you feel you must have. When that must dissolves, fear begins to lose its hold. You become less reactive, less defensive, less concerned with controlling every variable, and, in that freedom, your natural confidence emerges. Not the kind that is performed or exaggerated, but the kind that is quiet and consistent. The kind that does not need to prove itself, because it is not in question. This confidence is deeply attractive, because it is stable. It does not fluctuate based on immediate feedback. It remains present, regardless of the situation, and this consistency builds trust over time. Detachment also sharpens your discernment. When you are not clouded by the need for a specific outcome, you can see more clearly. You can recognize whether there is genuine alignment or not. You can sense whether the other person is truly interested or simply responding out of politeness or pressure. This clarity allows you to move more efficiently. You stop investing energy where it is not reciprocated. You stop forcing connections that are not naturally forming. You begin to direct your attention toward those who are already inclined to engage, to listen, to consider. And this focus amplifies your results, because you are no longer spreading your energy thin across every possibility. You are channeling it toward the right opportunities, and those opportunities respond more readily because they are aligned with what you offer. Detachment, then, is not about doing less. It is about doing what is necessary without adding the weight of need. It is about maintaining your intention while releasing your grip on how and when things must unfold. This balance is where true effectiveness lies. You act with clarity. You speak with confidence. You engage with presence. But you do not cling, and in not clinging, you allow space for things to come toward you. Because attraction does not occur in crowded energy. It requires openness. It requires space. It requires the absence of force. When you provide that space, when you step back internally while still showing up externally, you create the conditions for natural movement. People lean in, not because they are being pushed, but because they feel drawn. And what is drawn comes with far less resistance than what is forced. There is a moment that tests the strength of your inner world more than any other, and it is the moment when you hear the word no. For many, that single response carries weight far beyond its surface meaning. It feels like rejection, like denial, like a closing door that reflects something personal, something lacking, something not enough. And in that interpretation, energy contracts, confidence wavers. Doubt begins to speak louder than certainty. But there is a deeper truth hidden within every rejection, one that becomes visible only when you are willing to see beyond immediate appearances. Rejection is not a verdict on your worth, nor is it a final decision about your path. It is direction. It is movement. It is the quiet hand of alignment, guiding you away from what does not match toward what does. Yet, most people resist this idea. They cling to the outcome they had imagined. They replay the interaction, searching for what went wrong, what could have been said differently, what might have changed the result, and in doing so, they anchor themselves to a moment that has already passed, draining energy that could have. been used to move forward. This attachment creates suffering, not because rejection itself is painful, but because of the meaning assigned to it. When you believe that a no diminishes you, you shrink, you hesitate in your next attempt, you approach future opportunities with caution instead of clarity. And this hesitation begins to shape your results, reinforcing the very doubt that caused it. But when you begin to see rejection as redirection, everything shifts. You no longer interpret it as loss. You see it as information. You recognize that something in that interaction was not aligned, not ready, not meant to unfold in that moment, and instead of resisting that reality, you accept it as part of a larger movement that you may not yet fully see. This acceptance frees you. It allows you to remain steady, even when outcomes do not match your expectations. It prevents you from taking things personally that were never personal to begin with. It keeps your energy intact, so you can continue forward without carrying unnecessary weight. Because every interaction is a point of alignment. Either there is resonance or there is not. And when there is not, forcing it only creates friction. Rejection, then, is not an obstacle. It is a filter. It separates what fits from what does not. It refines your path by removing what is not in harmony with where you're going. And while this process may feel uncomfortable in the moment, it serves a purpose that becomes clear over time. The challenge is to trust that purpose before you can fully see it. To trust that what is being removed is making space for something more aligned. To trust that every closed door is preventing misalignment from taking root. To trust that your path is not defined by a single moment, but shaped by a series of adjustments that guide you forward. This trust requires discipline, because the mind often seeks immediate explanation. It wants to understand why something did not work, to find a reason that brings closure. But not all answers are available in the moment. Some clarity only comes with distance, with perspective, with time. So, instead of demanding answers, you remain open. You allow the experience to pass without attaching your identity to it. You observe it without letting it define you, and in doing so, you maintain your sense of self, independent of temporary outcomes. This independence is powerful because it keeps you moving. It prevents stagnation. It prevents overthinking. It prevents the cycle of hesitation that often follows rejection. Instead of stopping, you adjust. Instead of doubting, you refine. Instead of retreating, you continue. And with each step forward, your understanding deepens. You begin to notice patterns. You begin to recognize where alignment exists and where it does not. You become more attuned to the signals that indicate readiness, openness, compatibility. And this awareness allows you to navigate more effectively. Rejection sharpens your discernment. It teaches you to distinguish between persistence and misalignment. It helps you understand when to continue and when to redirect your energy. It shows you that not every opportunity is meant to be pursued, and that stepping away is sometimes the most aligned action you can take. This realization removes pressure. You no longer feel the need to make every situation work. You no longer measure your success by how many yes responses you receive. Instead, you measure it by how aligned your actions are with your values, your clarity, your direction. And this shift changes the way you show up. You become more selective, more intentional, more focused. You invest your energy where there is genuine potential rather than scattering it across every possibility. You approach each interaction with openness, but without attachment. Because you understand that the outcome is not entirely within your control. There are factors beyond what you can see: timing, readiness, circumstances, internal states of others that influence every decision. And when you accept this, you stop trying to control what cannot be controlled. You focus instead on what you can influence: your presence, your clarity, your consistency, your willingness to continue. And this focus brings stability. It anchors you in something that does not fluctuate with external responses. It allows you to remain grounded, even when outcomes vary. It builds resilience, not as a forced strength, but as a natural result of understanding. Because when you truly see rejection as redirection, it loses its power to disrupt you. It becomes part of the process rather than a deviation from it. It becomes a signal rather than a setback. It becomes movement rather than blockage. And in this perspective, you begin to appreciate rejection in a different way, not because it is comfortable, but because it is useful, not because it feels good, but because it serves a purpose. It clears the path. It refines your direction. It strengthens your alignment. And, most importantly, it keeps you from settling into spaces that were never meant for you. Because acceptance without alignment leads to outcomes that lack stability. It creates situations where effort is required to maintain what was never naturally fitting. And over time, this misalignment becomes more difficult to sustain. Rejection prevents this. It protects you from investing deeply in what would not have supported you fully. It redirects you toward opportunities that resonate more naturally, that require less force, that unfold with greater ease. But only if you allow it to do so. Only if you release the need to resist it. Only if you stop interpreting it as a reflection of your value and start seeing it as guidance for your path. And when you reach that point, when you can hear no without internal collapse, when you can experience rejection without losing your center, when you can continue forward without hesitation, you step into a different level of strength, a strength that is not dependent on constant approval, a strength that is not shaken by temporary outcomes, a strength that comes from knowing that your direction is larger than any single response. And from that place, you move differently, you speak differently, you engage differently, carrying with you a quiet understanding that every response, whether accepted or declined, is part of a greater unfolding that continues to guide you forward without needing your resistance, without needing your fear, without needing you to hold on to what has already shown you it does not belong.